Hi, everybody. Jeff Allen here. I want to do a video here now. I'm sorry, I got a cough, an ongoing cough. Got to deal with that. Trying to medication is trying to handle it, but bronchitis didn't. Plus COVID. COVID's over. Bronchitis got to still trying to deal with it. So it's kind of an ongoing thing right now. Lots of people in Europe have it for a long period of time. So I want to deal with the question of language access services is a civil right. And I don't want to be too specific. I want to be a little more large on kind of widen on this whole topic. So um, when I say language access, that can cover a lot of things. And I want to kind of put this under diversity inclusion and language inclusivity and kind of the overall range of things. I think this is really important because I do a lot of subtitling and captioning of videos too. So this fits into it as well. For the hard of hearing, and then also things for like speech to text for the or text to speech for the hard of visually impaired. I think this all kind of fits into an overall thing of language access. It's language and sign language as well. A lot of these services that allow to do this. And I want to cover it. I want to cover it because I saw this coming up, and I'm dealing with it just because I saw one up for the Creole language. For Creole Solutions was a company, and I think it's in the United States that did that language access as a civil right. And so I want to address this point, because the post said that there are lots of government agencies that have funding. So they cannot refuse any type of language access to you for services, health services, federal courts, and all this. And I agree with that, but I don't agree with that. And I want to say why. It's not that I don't agree in principle. It's that there are other factors involved that are really important. And I've been doing this I've been in this language field industry for coming on 4 decades, and I've been in the language technology, well, not just the language technology, but half of my career has been in language technologies and services for, of the past 30 years. Half it's been on language technology and speech technology and text and translation, all that. So automatic and human and whatever, computer assisted, everything. And language training to language classes and computer assisted training, computer assisted language applications and software and all that kind of stuff. So, but I think what's really important here is when I was selling translation services, when there were federal laws, at least in the United States, and I was not selling for U.S. territory, but it was one of the things I used. Or it even goes back even to much earlier when I was working on Creole languages in academia and for research and for things that, sorry for the cough, but it sounds worse than it is. One of the things I would focus on is, try to get the governments to provide literacy for languages, for Creole languages, other minority languages, lower resource less commonly known languages, low resource data languages, whatever we didn't call these things. And then I did it for probably 10 years. And then, then after that, I got more into the whole computer assisted learning and translation and language industry. And so a lot of things using software to help do that, to promote it, rather than depend on the governments to do that. And then I sold language technologies and sold language services as well for Francophone territories. And then when I would do anything, I would always use language legislation for languages, where there was a necessity to have the governments that had to do this. So kind of like these laws that are brought up a lot in these posts about language access rights. And there's a lot of that right now. I mean, there's the whole thing of the Bill 96, I think, in Canada, and then there's the whole New Jersey thing happening right now in 2022 October, November for language rights and language access rights and all that. And so I'm recognizing all this. But what I want to do is actually talk about another side of it, because it's easy to say, well, we have the right, you have to do it. Well, it doesn't quite always work that way. It's okay to that I would say that works for planning ahead. Okay, when you want to plan for a service, and you can argue for the right to have that funding. That's a really good way to do it. So when you're selling the service, that's a good advantage point. It's a real good advantage point to be able to sell that service to a government agency, or for health, or courts, or court interpreting, or a lot of different things, right? But the situations where I see the posts made on LinkedIn a lot. Well, you have the right to do this in courts and stuff. Well, usually the situations, and I'll say it from that end of too, is that usually when the people are in courts, it's too late to like say we want to have this service up front, right? They're there. I mean, it's right there. It's happening, and then you discover that the person needs that need tomorrow, right? And you can't just like say, well, we can fill this need with this person tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. I mean, I see more posts on Pros.com, Translators Cafe. I mean, I've been in moderation groups of this kinds of things, and I see so many jobs, and there are so many people. It's too short to fulfill the need, and to be able to get the money for it. So, and so it's easy to say it's a civil right, but when you don't have the funding, and I'll say why the funding is, okay? So usually these things, and I'm going to get off, so I'll be here. Kids are coming. I'm going to try to finish up the video. I've had breakfast all morning. It was kind of quiet now. I had breakfast outside to try to do videos. Kind of cool. That lunchtime kids arrive, so I'll try to finish up here. But the thing is that that's okay when you're planning ahead, but when you can't plan ahead and you have to do it now, using that civil right thing doesn't work. I mean, I'm being honest, but it doesn't always work. I mean, it can if they have people available to do it today, but you usually got to fly somebody from one city to another or something to make this happen. The amount of cost of doing this is astronomical sometimes for certain needs, and for really, I don't want to say obscure languages, exotic language. I mean, I don't want to call these things where there's really a few speakers. Well, there's a lot less speakers, and it's really hard to find the people that have the skills to do this for interpreting translation. It's really tough to find. So it's a niche kind of area. But the whole thing of the funding is that you got to plan up front, right? And if you don't have it immediately, then you can't do it. So I think that you got to be careful. We need to be careful. I mean, we need to promote this, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't promote it. I shouldn't say that we shouldn't have awareness of it. But then when you get in a situation where you can't have it because it wasn't planned for, the person who needs it didn't know that they need to plan it because they didn't know they have the right to do it. They didn't know they could ask for it up front. So you get the situation of, the last minute situation. And then it's too late. You can't say, well, I have to have it. Well, if you want to postpone the thing, the trial or something, you can do that. or you just don't have it. And that's kind of sad. It's got really difficult, like in life-saving situations in hospitals. I mean, I've dealt with this for trauma-related patients in Haiti with Doctors Without Borders. I mean, I did things to make things happen within 48 hours, right? So the doctors had the things, try to give them something, at least something to be able to to work with the patients that don't speak their language, right? So, but this is crisis. This is a crisis situation. I think this is crisis management. This is where this, foreseeing things, foreseeing needs, planning for it, planning ahead, and make it available so you can have it, and then have it quickly available when it's needed. That's one thing. But then crisis management is like an entire thing. There's an entire field in itself. And I work with a lot of people on that. And so you just can't plan this. You don't know when the crisis is going to happen, right? And this is usually not in these places that have this funding, right? So then you got to find ways to get the funding that outside of the normal funding cycles. So this is why I say we need to be careful because I've done all these different things, and I focus a lot on the crisis ones because those are ones that don't have the funding. So I need to get the funding for it, and sometimes you don't have fun. You can't make the funding that quickly, so it gets really kind of complicated. Start with this cough, but it sounds like worse than it is. Um, and so it's really, I think that we just need to be careful to always put everything under language access rights. Um, because it doesn't always apply. And if you can't have the funding at the last minute, it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. And I have a lot of those situations, and I try to find another way to do it. So I use kind of your crowdsourcing or volunteer things, crisis management to motivate people who have the skills at the last minute. Probably without the most professional skills, but they got the motivation, right? And so this is a key. And so usually pro bono and volunteer, and because they're willing to do it. So I've run some of the most complex. I said in my Microsoft lecture talk, my Microsoft research talk, I run some of the most complex programs of my entire career, doing volunteer pro bono stuff and crowdsourcing and all that were more complicated than my normal job of doing kind of really complex stuff, really complex programs with massive funding. So I think I think we just need to be careful of this. Again, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't say language action. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need to promote it, but we need to promote it in ways that show the direction. This is service. We're promoting this. We're doing it here. I'm going to finish up here. We're doing the ones where we can promote it. We can make it happen. We get the funding ahead of time and then schedule it and have it so it's available. And we got to think about how do we do with the crisis management situations with, all the situation in Ukraine and Russia that happened, several months ago. And then you find all these Ukrainians and Russians at the border and the Polish border and Hungarian border, and you got to deal with it right at the last minute. You can't plan ahead that this is going to happen. So you can't plan ahead. You have to have the funding. You can't say the European Commission, we got to have all this money now because they didn't plan for it, because they don't know about it, because it's not kind of on the radar. So there are a lot of these things, and I think we just need to be careful. And when our awareness things, to be careful not to tell people you always have the right, because no, if you don't have the funding at the moment you need it, you're kind of stuck. I've been in those situations, and I found the ways around it. Okay, I did find the ways around it, sometimes, not always, and this is reality. So, and there are also, I will say too, that for the whole subtitling things, the whole COVID confinement lockdown kind of situation put us in a situation where we had it, and we were just beginning to have it's like Microsoft Teams and Zoom. Microsoft Teams actually had the Microsoft Teams had just released 2 months before COVID confined lockdown happened, their first beta of captions for English only. Okay, live captions. It was in beta, and then it kind of turned out because the whole when everybody started using it, they started getting then the whole lockdown bad. Everybody needed it immediately, and the whole system went into massive performance problems because it just wasn't ready for it. Then Zoom took many months to come out with their feature. It was really wanted, really asked for it, and then they needed it immediately. They went from 10 million users to 300 million users the next day. So their whole performance of the whole system was really caught, and they couldn't make that caption thing happen. So you can't just say, we have the right to this, we have to have this, because if you can't technically make it happen, technologically make it happen, because of system problems or performance problems, and actually being able to make the things work together. Technically, I know this stuff really well. And sometimes I have to tell people, and I made videos recently about the technique of why we can't do things. And they say, yeah, but we got to have it. We have to have the language right access. I said, look, language right access doesn't change the fact that we can't technically and technologically make it happen now. We need to be able to do this. So I explain a lot of this, and I think that we just have to be realistic under certain conditions and things. And I'm not even getting into all the details of data privacy, okay, which gets it more complicated. So there are other reasons where doing it the last minute and doing it could actually put you into another court case, okay? It can get you another illegal kind of ramification or consequence that you don't want to be in because you did it last minute. You made a decision last minute, did it wrong. So, so this is kind of a really, this is kind of a really growing and interesting thing for a lot of different, the whole language sector, language industry sector, and all that, and it's a growing need. And we've just seen a few of these things I mentioned, these crises, COVID, lockdown, war, um, earthquake that happened to devastate the country, and then you have all thousands and thousands of NGO employee staff coming and helping out the country. This influx of people that creates a need that you have to have now. So, and then the whole funding thing goes. It sends your whole funding structure into a chaotic mess, and then you got to deal with it and find different ways to do it. So, some of these structures, these big NGOs that are used to this, they know how to do this. So, but they have high administrative fees and things because it takes a lot to plan ahead. Whereas then people say, "Oh yeah, but they're gonna, you know where the money's going." Well, yeah, because it takes a lot to plan ahead. That's why a lot of people focus on the little structures, but then they're not organized enough to handle the crises in a certain way. So it kind of depends, right? So I'm not saying that's always that way, but I know a lot of, I know quite a few people in the disaster response kind of situation where they use their funding in the most wisest ways. They try to be really careful with it, but it's a struggle because finding funding is the hard part, and he spends a lot of time doing it. So again, I just want to be careful with this. I want to say that I want to paint a larger picture of this, and that's not always what we say it is. Because sometimes the view that's posted on the LinkedIn post is very specific, very directed, very targeted towards one certain flavor of a need, rather than seeing all the different needs under that umbrella of a larger gamut or range of needs that fit under language access rights. So again, I don't want to be negative. I just want to kind of be realistic here. Having done this a lot in a lot of different areas, and I can't emphasize that even more. And there are things that I get called a lot of calls and stuff, and get involved in a lot of things where I hear another example of something that's kind of another kind of version of or an adaptive version of something I've done before, and so got to find different ways to make it happen. So it's a super interesting area. It's ongoing. It's never ending. Because language communication is never ending, right? Across all cultures. And if we want to start talking with the Klingons and other aliens and other languages that don't exist anymore or have never existed, and we just want to do it for cool research, that's another problem, right? So, so I just kind of want to paint that picture, and say I'm supporting everyone on this, but there's sometimes I just say no to things because there's just no way you can do it. It can't be done. It cannot be done technologically today, or technically today. Or there's just no way to get the funding in a realistic way at all, and there's no way to motivate enough people to be able to the right skills to be able to make it happen. Okay, so in the last minute, I've seen a lot of people say, and I've seen people say no, they just don't have the bandwidth to work on things, and they're honest about it. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration when considering the civil right language access civil right thing. I'm really careful with that. I don't always use that angle because it's not always appropriate. So and it all depends. So just want to say that. Just want to make that pretty clear from my point of view, at least of that. And I'm always there's no single answer to anything. There's no one answer fits all situations. One size fits all. There's not. It's just one of them. So thanks so much.